Hey, Tommy from the Run Testers, another running shoe full review. In this video, we are going to be taking a look at the Adidas Prime X Strung 2. Now, these were sent to us by the guys over at Sport Shoes. We're not paid to review this shoe, so we can say whatever we want. But a big thanks to the guys over at Sport Shoes for getting these over so that we can actually do a load of reviews about the shoe. Right, let's dive in and do the full review. The Adidas Adizero Prime X 2 Strung costs £250 or $300. It weighs in at 298 grams or 10.5 ounces for men in a size 8, and the drop is 6.5 millimeters. The Prime X 2 Strung is a tricky shoe to classify. Despite having a 50mm stack height and 2 carbon plates, making it illegal for use by elites when competing, Adidas has designed it to be a race shoe for recreational runners. Those carbon plates replace the previous energy rods found in the first version and sit within 3 layers of Lightsrike Pro foam. The upper is made from the same Strung material seen in the first iteration, but redesigns it with a new sock-like stretchy section across the midfoot. There's also a slightly wider base to add more stability and an updated Continental rubber outsole to improve grip and durability.
So the fit for me has been much improved with the second version of the Adidas Prime X Strung. I had really bad heel rub with the first one that really diminished my enjoyment of that shoe, and actually in general I think the fit's been improved for me with this shoe. Like, I know some people don't really like this kind of booty knitted tongue style we've got here, but I found that it held my foot in place really securely on fast runs, didn't get any moving around laterally on the top of that big stack of foam, which is good. And although the heel design doesn't look like it's been changed much really, I think the overall lockdown of the shoe is much better, and I haven't had any heel rub with the Prime X Strung 2. Luckily, good amount of room in the toe box as well, so I will stick to my normal size. So I'm a UK 9 with Adidas, that's a US 9.5, and sometimes I need to go a half size up with Adidas because that's obviously a bit smaller than some other brands that convert to a US 10, but with the Prime X Strung I was very happy in my normal UK 9, whereas in the Adidas Pro 3 for example I would size up. But yeah, all in all, the fit was very good for me with the new shoe.
So fit for me was interesting. The shift to this kind of booty style upper I think is a bit of a problem. I really struggle to get my feet into them, and I basically need a shoehorn to get them on. It's a real struggle. It's the same problem that I had with the first generation Alpha Fly when I've got this kind of booty construction. It's honestly like a total pain for me to put them on. It kind of puts me off wearing them. Once they're on, though, once I've squeezed my foot through this kind of narrow opening, the fit is generally quite okay. It's pretty snug, but it's kind of what you expect from a race shoe like this. However, it's not as quite as secure and as dialed in as I would expect overall. From the wrestle to get my foot into them, after that, you think they're going to be really tight and hugging. I found there was a bit of movement in the heel area that also wasn't really helped much when I started to kind of fiddle down the lace and try and get a better lockdown. It's not loose, but it's also not 100% secure either. However, despite that and my struggles squeezing into them with my big kind of high insteps and wide feet, I'd still recommend going true to sizing these, because in terms of the length and what's going on in the toe box, that's probably what you'll need.
Fit for me has been pretty good overall. I've had mine in a UK size 8, and I kind of mentioned it in the first video. I've had some issues in terms of discomfort with the kind of lacing and getting good lockdown here. I have tweaked things a little bit and it has been better since then. I do think you really need to have to play around to get a good lockdown, make sure things are not slipping around to get the kind of best fit in this shoe. But I like the fact that you're getting a good amount of space up front here in the toe box. I think it kind of naturally kind of opens up with this kind of upper material, narrows in at its kind of midfoot as well, to give you that kind of more locked in kind of racing style feel here. You're not getting a massive amount of padding here, particularly up here. You're getting a little bit inside of the shoe, so it's enough, but ultimately it's trying to kind of, I think, balance out, keeping the weight down, but also giving you a little bit of comfort over that, or added comfort that you would need over those longer runs. So yeah, for me, I would say go true to size. I felt pretty good. I do think you need to work a little bit to get a good lockdown and make sure you don't get any kind of discomfort like I did kind of on the sides of the kind of lacing here, particularly up top here on the top of my foot.
The fit for me in the Prime X 2 Strung was fine. This is a size 8 UK. I'm normally a size 8 in the UK. Adidas shoes do tend to be a little bit small in the UK, so I would probably say that if you're going to go by the standards of Adidas, you probably want to go half a size up for comfort. I've actually been okay with these. In the original Adidas Prime X Strung, they were a bit too small for me. My I found the fit to be quite uncomfortable, and I did get quite a bit of rubbing on the heel section. These are a size 8. I don't have any issues with them at all, but there isn't a lot of space in the forefoot, so maybe get half a size up in the UK.
Now on the run test, I've done around 25 miles in the Prime X2 Strung, including an all-out mile test and a 90-minute mixed pace test. That's mostly been on the road with the odd kind of park path or river path thrown in for good measure. For the mile test, I clocked one of my fastest ever miles on pretty tired legs, and these shoes performed really well. On the 90-minute run test, I mixed up the miles between 10k, half and marathon pace, along with some slower miles to see how protective the X2 Strung will be when you rock back a bit. I'm thinking about kind of those last miles of a marathon potentially if things aren't going well. Now, I loved the Prime X Strung first generation. I ran some excellent races and clocked some great times over the mile and the marathon distance. And I felt like the Strung uppers were some of the best of Adidas's uppers, far more comfortable than, and a big step up on those kind of fussy uppers that you get on the Adidas Pros, which I'm not really a fan of. Unfortunately, that's kind of gone with the X2 because of the squeeze of getting into these shoes. For a wide-footed, high-in-step runner like me, they no longer feel straightforward and easy to lock down and naturally secure. They're generally comfortable and roomy enough overall, but I couldn't really get that reliable hold that I wanted, and I found that it was much easier to adjust in the original Prime X Strung. Now, another thing that I think has changed is the stability wasn't world beating on the original Strung. You wouldn't necessarily expect it to be on a massive kind of super foam stack shoe like this, but in my tests I think I found the X2 Strung are even less stable. There's practically no stability here at all. It's very noticeable from the moment you start running them. I'm not sure if it's the bigger stack in the forefoot, which I think you notice, but these are wild. I nearly rolled my ankle twice during testing. You can feel the extra foam, I think, under the ball of the foot here as it works to kind of roll you through each step. You've got to see those 3 layers of Lightsrike Pro. That brings quite a lot of lateral movement, I find, and you really have to be focused on your foot placement. They also still don't cope too well in the corners. I often felt my foot sliding off the base. This also happened with the Gen 1, but because there's less foothold security, I thought it was a little more pronounced with these Prime X Strung 2 shoes. Now that said, when you are concentrated and you're landing with precision, these are still excellent. They're incredibly springy, lively, energetic and fast. It's a big bouncy bounder of a shoe. It's a leg sparing ride that I think that gives you back plenty in each step. Unsurprisingly, I think it performs best when you're moving in your best form, you know, with real intent, with real race intent. You're sort of going out and you're going to hit your very best. And though the lack of stability isn't great when you slow down on tired legs, this big 3-layer stack of Lightsrike Pro that's now got a slightly sort of lower drop, I think still does protect you from the road and foot fatigue, probably more than some of the other more direct carbon shoes, things like the New Balance SC Elite or maybe the Hoka Rocket X2, for example.
I've really been enjoying testing out this shoe. I've done quite a lot. I've probably done about 100k in it so far, and I did quite a lot of runs in the original Prime X Strung, and that shoe I had a lot of issues with. It was very bouncy, it was a very enjoyable shoe to run in. It wasn't a very stable shoe. They're both obviously very high shoes, but the difference with the original Prime X Strung is that it had a really thin base, so it was quite wobbly. What I found is that it was a great shoe, a really fun, enjoyable, fast shoe to run in if you're going out for a training run on the flat. You had a lot of energy, you were paying attention to where you were running, all those sorts of things. It was a great shoe for that. But what I found is that when I used it for a half marathon race or when I did longer training runs and I started to get tired, I started to lose a little bit of control with the wobbliness of the midsole. Not a major issue for a lot of people if you're not bothered about the instability of a midsole in a shoe, but for me I just didn't feel comfortable in that shoe, and I did have other issues with it as well, the main being a lot of heel rub, and it did mean that I had to wear plasters with it at some points, just because of the heel section on the first shoe was a little bit uncomfortable and a little bit pointy. This version is quite different than the original. It's a lot heavier, it feels a lot chunkier, it's a lot more stable, but it does lose a little bit of the magic that you get from the first shoe, which is that bounce and propulsion and liveliness. But it still does have a lot of that in it. It feels like a very fast shoe. I've done a couple of park runs in this shoe now, and I haven't even been really going for a PB, but I've got very close to my fastest times. It's a very fast shoe. Despite the weight, despite the cumbersome feel of the shoe, it does feel very, very lightweight when you're running in it. And It's a good shoe for training as well. I did like the first one for training runs. I found that if I was going out for an easier session or a standard run, which for me would be about 4-minute, 30-minute kilometers, I found that was a great shoe. It just made the run a bit easier and you just felt like you could go a bit faster in it. This has probably lost a little bit of that, but I did a lot of my training for the final few weeks for Berlin Marathon in this shoe, which meant that I had to go out and maintain a consistent pace around my marathon pace, which was about 4-minute 05 kilometers. And I found this shoe was great for that. I could really maintain my marathon pace in this shoe for extended periods of time. I'd have to go out and do maybe 12 to 15 miles at my marathon pace. And this shoe was great for it. It just really cruised me through it, felt very comfortable. I mean, I'd even go as far as to say that if I decided to use this for the marathon, it might be a good shoe. It's probably a bit heavy for that, so I probably wouldn't advise you using this shoe as a race shoe. By being heavier, it's actually become more of a daily training shoe as opposed to a race shoe, but it's still quite fast. And surprisingly fast considering the weight of it. I don't really notice the weight when it's out there. Other than that, what I would say about the shoe is that it's a lot more comfortable than the first one. So I think they've modified the shoe quite a bit. I think it sits more in that realm of shoes like the Super Blast and things like that, where you want a really nice, enjoyable shoe to do lots of miles in, longer miles. I wouldn't say it's a particularly great shoe for easy runs. It does feel like it's pushing you forward quite a lot. It's a little bit more aggressive than what I'd like for a long, easy run. But when I'm trying to do a tempo run or maintain a consistent pace at like anything between 4:15 and 4:40-minute kilometers, it feels great. It's a really good shoe for that. And some of the more cushioned shoes I've got for long runs don't really do very well at that pace. So I think that's the sweet spot for this shoe. Especially if you're doing like marathon training, you want a really nice, enjoyable cruising, relatively bouncy shoe to do a lot of those miles in. I think it's really good for that as well. So I think it's a solid shoe. It's a very expensive shoe. That's where the rub really comes with this shoe. But I think if you're looking for that sort of enjoyable cruising shoe for lots of training miles, I think it's a very good option.
So into that run test, and I have eased into doing 50k in this shoe. I think mainly it's because I have really enjoyed running in this shoe overall. I think most of the sessions that I've done have been very good. I think probably bar one. I'll get into that in a minute, but I think in terms of the general runs that I've done, you know, post the kind of first run video that we did, I've done some kind of more shorter runs. I've done some kind of longer, kind of 10 mile plus runs. That's kind of where I'm at in terms of my longer runs, and trying to run at kind of a mixture of paces, kind of more up tempo, try to run a little bit quicker in it, try to ease off in the shoe as well. And what I would say overall is that this is a shoe that rewards you when you are running a little bit quicker. I think anything from kind of up tempo to kind of quicker kind of race pace, it feels great to do that in. I think ultimately I love what you're getting from the midsole here. I think you're getting something that's not too soft and squidgy, but also gives you a little bit of comfort there, but also a little bit of bounce as well there too. But what I get from this shoe is something, because you've got quite a wide feeling shoe, it's something that's ultimately pretty stable and controlled as well too, where I think you lose that when you are running a little bit slower, and I think, you know, you feel the kind of awkwardness of the shoe. But when you are running a little bit quicker and engaging what's in this shoe, it feels great to run in. I think the only bad run I've had has been when I did a track session with it. I think we were doing kind of shorter, kind of thing at 5-6 time 800 meter kind of reps, and I just felt in the session, later in the session, I felt the heaviness of the shoe, and that I think what is going to count against it in terms of maybe, you know, using for kind of, I said, interval sessions and things like that, where I did find the weight of the shoe a little bit more noticeable. On the longer runs, it felt absolutely fine. You know, I almost like the fact you've got that extra level of protection and stack to kind of give you that that level of cushioning that you'd want over long runs, but also it doesn't detract from giving you something that feels nice and enjoyable and gives you that level of bounce that I kind of want when I'm doing those longer runs, maybe at those slightly quicker paces overall. Outsole wise, it's feel pretty good. As I said, I've done over 50k here. I'm not seeing any terrible wear. I mean, it's got one of those Continental outsoles that Adidas uses, and it's felt pretty good so far. So I'm confident it can handle a lot of mileage, this shoe, compared to some other shoes that I've used recently. I'm not seeing any terrible wear just yet, as I say, over 50k run. So from an outsole point of view, I think gripping feels pretty good on roads, and I think, you know, long stretches it feels fantastic. I think in terms of durability, it looks like it's going to be pretty good so far in terms of what I'm seeing in my runs that I've done in this shoe. So yeah, overall very positive, as I would say. I think, you know, you get something great out of it when you're running quicker in it. I think when you ease off, it doesn't feel as good, and if that's a shoe that you think it's going to be, then I don't think it works like that. But if you're looking for something, I think that excels kind of those kind of quicker paces over longer, and I think as shorter distances as well, I think you're getting something absolutely fine that works from that point of view. So it does have some versatility, just I think at a particular type of speed ultimately. But yeah, in terms of my run test, apart from that track session, I think everything else is pretty good in terms of my time in the Adidas Prime X2 Strung.
So I've done 50k in the Prime X Strung 2 across a range of training runs, and I have to say I've pretty much enjoyed every single step in the shoe. It's really, really fun to run in. That's probably the big takeaway I have on the shoe, is that when you put it on, you know, you're not thinking about the price, you're not thinking about anything else, and you just go and run in it. It's very, very fun to run in this shoe. It is certainly a little bit more stable than the first version for me. It's still quite wobbly, but it's pretty more stable, and I can go and just use the shoe around me, you know, without thinking about the terrain too much. So if you're going over cambered pavements or slightly broken asphalt in general, you don't really have to worry about it. Whereas with the Prime X Strung 1, I would plan runs to get to a nice flat bit with good smooth roads, so I could run in it without worrying about stability and that kind of thing. So I've done several easy to steady runs in the shoe, and a couple of just steady runs, like I've done a couple of sub 40 10Ks, and I've done some steady runs where I moved from around 420 per K pace down towards about 330 per K pace, which is my marathon pace. And throughout that pace range, it feels really good. Like, it is comfortable to use for easy runs. You bounce along, and then you certainly feel the extra life in it though when you do start to run fast. It really does come into its own once you start hitting faster paces. You get a really bouncy feeling, you know, long flight time in the shoe, and although it is a big shoe and noticeably big on the foot, it doesn't really affect its performance at all at those kind of paces. You get a big spring from it, and you can just move effortlessly quick. I think it's fair to say, like, pretty much in every run I've done in it, I've been moving a bit faster than I expected for heart rate and effort level. And that I did one progression 10K, or the second half did in around 18 minutes, and just felt very easy, almost too easy, to the point where you're going, I'm doing these kind of daily training runs, maybe I should be in a shoe that I feel it a bit more, because, you know, I don't feel like I'm feeling it in the shoe, so maybe I'm not getting the benefits. Obviously, you can just push a bit harder and get your heart rate up to where it would be with any other shoe. But yeah, it certainly is a shoe that makes running quick feel pretty effortless. That is, though, with those kind of paces. So like I said, those are more easy, steady paces for me up towards marathon race pace. If you start pushing faster than that, I think you do notice the size of the shoe a little bit more. So I took it down to the track to do a session where I was also using the Prime X Strung 1 to compare them. So I did a couple of mile reps and 5 400 meter reps in both shoes, and it was all quite a controlled pace and just getting back into the start of a training block, so nothing too hard. I felt when I swapped into the Prime X Strung 1, having done my reps in the Prime X Strung 2, how much lighter the original shoe is and how much more aggressive and, you know, dynamic it feels. When you're rolling through, you get a more aggressive toe off. It really feels much punchier and faster, even though I was running at the same kind of pace, obviously. But also the Prime X Strung 2 felt good for the reps, but the 1 certainly felt better. It feels a much racier shoe, and in general, that'd probably be my concern with the Prime X Strung 2, is if you're picking it up as a shoe you're going to take to those fast race paces, to look at short distances and that kind of thing, I don't think it's that great for that. It is a really heavy shoe. Like, its weight doesn't matter that much because it is so bouncy, but at the same time, you know, it's over 100 grams heavier than something like the Vaporfly 3, or 50 grams heavier than the Adios Pro 3, and that kind of thing. And that does tell, you know, and if you're looking at it as a racing shoe, for me, I enjoyed it a lot more on just general training runs, moving from easy to steady paces, long runs, tempo runs, really good, because you get that phenomenal amount of bounce. And when I'm trying to push faster than that, I'm quite a high cadence runner. I get a lot of my speed is just from turning my legs over and shuffling along very quickly, and that's obviously a little bit harder to do in this shoe. Maybe you'll feel a bit better if you're more of a bounding runner, and it's all about the energy return you get here, which obviously is pretty sensational. So yeah, all in all, really enjoyed my running in the shoe, but do have some qualms about it.
So my initial verdict on the Adidas Prime X2 Strung is that it's great. I really like it. I think it's a great shoe. I know a lot of people who tried the original version aren't as fond of this shoe because it loses a little bit of that magic from the bounce. I prefer it. I like the fact it's a little bit more stable. I like the fact that it's designed for a little bit more comfort and security than the original shoe, but I don't think it loses a lot of the benefits that you get from the first one. Even though it's a lot heavier, I don't really notice that, and I think it's a solid, enjoyable training shoe that you can do a lot of miles in and maintain a really nice consistent pace in. I wouldn't race in it. It's just a little bit too chunky for that. I think maybe if I was doing a marathon in this shoe, I think I would notice the weight later on in the race. Earlier on, it seems to, when you're doing faster sessions, it seems to be really good. But I think I'd notice that weight as I came into the later stages of a marathon distance, or maybe even half marathon distance. Other than that, I think it's a solid shoe. I think the problem comes down to the price, because the way that I would use this shoe, I think there are other shoes out there that are cheaper that I could use for the same thing. Still, the Saucony Endorphin Speed 3 is probably a better option. I think this is more enjoyable shoe for those longer runs, but I think the Endorphin Speed 3 is better value because it's a lot cheaper than this shoe and you can use it for the similar sort of thing. I'd also say something like the Super Blast is another good option. That's a very expensive shoe as well, so it would be difficult to choose between this and that one. I think I'd probably go for this one if money was an option, but the Super Blast is a little bit better for easy runs as well. It just feels a little bit more comfortable, and obviously doesn't have a plate in it, so it's a little bit more natural feeling as well.
So my verdict on the Adidas Prime X2 Strung is that when I have managed to get this fit to work for me, what I've got is a really enjoyable shoe overall. I think it's a shoe that can work for shorter and longer distances. I think mainly though you want to be keeping at up-tempo paces in those runs. I think when you ease off, you just don't get the rewards of running in this shoe. When you are running a little bit quicker, I think you get something that feels energetic, bouncy, but also very controlled and stable as well, which is something I wasn't 100% expecting in this shoe. I think the ultimate question is should you buy this shoe? It is very expensive, and I think if you liked the Prime X2 and you wanted something that felt a little bit more stable, then I think that's what you're going to get here in this shoe. I kind of class this in that kind of super trainer category, those ones that you could potentially run quicker sessions, race in, but also, you know, you get something a little bit more durable compared to those kind of top tier shoes. Now, with this shoe, it's kind of sitting on its own in terms of that category. I think, you know, I almost thought the New Balance SC Trainer V2 would be like that, but it's not. I think, you know, similar with the Mac X, it wasn't quite like that either. I think the Magic Speed 3 is probably the only shoe that I think kind of sits in that category, but, you know, obviously it hasn't got the same level of stack height as it does on the Prime X2 Strung. So from that point of view, if you are looking for something, or I think if you're looking for something that can soak up a lot of that quicker mileage, and you don't want to use your kind of, you know, top tier kind of racing shoe, then this is something that can deliver that. Ultimately though, it's very expensive, and it's an expensive shoe to want to have something that does that. But I do think, as I said, I think it's something you can race in. I think it works for a mixture of distances, and, you know, mainly keeping it on the quicker side ultimately. But it is expensive, and if you're willing to pay that, I think you are going to get a good shoe overall. It's just you can probably get better value elsewhere.
So Prime X Strung 2 is a really fun shoe, and not really what I expected actually when I got it in. This feels more like a super trainer to me than a, you know, flat out carbon racing shoe designed for race day. It does a little bit of everything really quite well, brings a lot of fun to everyday training. Like, it is just about as much fun you can have just on a run in general, but I don't think it's one that I'd be using for races myself or really fast sessions. It feels like one that you'd have in a training rotation. You could even have it in rotation with the Prime X Strung 1 and use that as your race day and speed day shoe, with the Prime X2 being the more general trainer in it. This actually suits me, to be honest, for this shoe, because I wouldn't race in the Prime X2 because of the stack height. And obviously I'm not an elite runner, and the rules about stack height are mainly for elites, but I wouldn't really feel comfortable using it at my kind of pace in a race, and I've never really seen it on the feet of runners around me either at all. So, but actually with the Prime X2, that's not really so much of a concern, because I wouldn't use it for racing either, because I don't think it's got the performance of legal shoes that are just much lighter. Things like the Alphafly 2 and the Adios Pro 3, the Mizuno Wave Rebellion Pro. These are big, very bouncy shoes, but legal and just much lighter. I'd much rather be racing in them or going and doing fast track reps in those shoes compared to the Prime X2. I don't think it's quite as fast. I think it is more of that super trainer vibe where you can pull it on every day and bounce around to your heart's content. However, even doing that role really well, it's really expensive for that role. Like, super trainer, you're going to drop 250 quid, $300. I know some of the price of the shoes are getting out of hand, but even compared to the Super Blast, that's really, really expensive for a shoe that I don't really think would have the chops for me to race in, even if I wasn't bothered about the legal stack height. So you can just spend a lot less and get very capable, more practical shoes that have a lower stacks, or even less wobbly, have better outsoles. Endorphin Speed 3, the Puma DV8 Nitro 2, the Adidas Boston 12. These are all really great shoes that I'd pick up ahead of this, and maybe they're not quite as bouncy and maybe not quite as fun, but they are lighter, they are more practical just to use on everyday terrain and have a lot of speed in them still are comfortable for long runs. Like, this is a great shoe, a luxury shoe though is how I'd put it. It's not a shoe that you really need in your rotation at all, but if you picked it up, you are going to enjoy using it, I'll say that. But you can just get a much more practical shoe for a lot less that will serve you better, I think. And if I was buying a rotation now, that is what I'd do. I wouldn't go and buy the Prime X Strung 2, but if you do, yeah, it's great fun. Like I really enjoyed using it, but I think it's pretty important to know that I don't think you're getting a super speedy shoe here. You are getting a very fun and speedy shoe, but not as speedy as the first version of the shoe, or indeed, I think, legal race. Even the Adidas Pro 3, I think, is a faster, more speed-focused shoe. This, to me, feels like a shoe that you pull on a lot more regularly and use for a range of training, but not necessarily those flat-out fast days.
Now, verdict for me, well, this is a bit of a mixed bag. I don't think the upper change works, not for my kind of feet anyway. I much prefer having more control over the fit and the lockdown. I also think an already pretty unstable shoe is now even more so because of the bigger volume of squishy, springy, wobbly Lightsrike Pro across the base now. It's still not great in the corners, so it's going to be best for straight road urban city marathons and races, halves maybe as well. The weight gains I think are quite noticeable here too, and that will potentially limit what some runners might use this shoe for. It makes it probably a little less likely as a 5k shoe, for example, particularly on a twisty turny course. But despite all of that, I kind of love running in this shoe. It's got fun, wild, crazy energy, and on the right day, moving with the right intent, I can definitely see this as having marathon PB potential if you're willing to forego the fact that it's not got a race legal stack, of course. It's just got that energy sparing effect that you need with 6 miles to go in a marathon, the same as the Alpha Fly and the original Strung. Price hike in the UK is also a bit frustrating, though in the US that's not an issue. But overall, I have to say, I think I preferred the first generation. If you can find that for its original price or cheaper, I think it's easily a match, if not better, than this version on many fronts. Having said that, this is a shoe that I have really enjoyed. I am a big fan, despite its kind of shortcomings that I've mentioned here. It's a shoe that I've really enjoyed running in, and I definitely will go and race in it very soon.
So that's it from us on this review. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, click that little bell, and check the channel out for all the other videos we've got coming up. We've also got our monthly podcast that comes out at the end of each month. If you go into the caption below, you can find a link to that. Big thanks to Sport Shoes as well for getting hold of these shoes for us, and because we've been doing a lot of videos on these shoes recently. So if you go into the caption below, you can find a link to find out more about the Adidas Prime X2 Strung. Thanks a lot for watching. Catch you next time.